I surprised my family by taking them on holiday, but my powerful sister tried to hijack the trip and get rid of me, so I canceled her ticket and didn't take her. Now she's homeless and begging to come back. I'm 29 and come from what you call a close-knit family, but let me tell you, that word carries a lot of weight here. There are 3 of us siblings. Me, my 26-year-old brother, and my 24-year-old sister Bonnie. Now, my brother and I get along very well. We have the typical brotherly relationship, wrestling with each other one minute and supporting each other the next. But things are a bit more complicated with Bonnie. Bonnie has always been the golden child of the family. In the eyes of our parents, she is the kind of girl who never makes mistakes, while my brother and I are expected to demonstrate a sense of responsibility and maturity. Bonnie made minor mistakes, such as forgetting to do the housework, simply because she was tired from being too active. She had good grades in maths, but she was more inclined towards creative thinking. Meanwhile, if I even leave my socks on the floor, you'd think I'd committed a capital offense. This dynamic created a rift between us, which grew wider and wider as we got older. It's not that I don't love my sister, I do. After all, she is my family, but her sense of entitlement always stresses me out, and it's not just me. My brother's patience with her is even worse than mine. If you put them in a room together for more than 5 minutes, I bet there's going to be a fight. Let me give you an example. Last Christmas, Bonnie came empty-handed as an excuse for our family gift exchange, saying she was a poor college student. You can understand that, right? That's fair enough, but a few days ago she posted photos of her new iPhone and designer boots on Instagram, and my brother accused her of being materialistic. She burst into tears and accused him of being materialistic, and guess who our parents comforted? That's right, you guessed it, Bonnie. But despite all this, I've always tried to be a generous person. I think that as we get older, everything will get better. Bonnie will mature, our parents will start treating us more equally, and we'll laugh about it all together. Earlier this year, I won the lottery at work. I mean, a jackpot, and it made my eyes pop out like a cartoon character. After the initial shock, my first thought was that I wanted to do something nice for my family. Our parents' anniversary was coming up, and I had a brilliant idea. Why not treat everyone to a family vacation? We hadn't traveled together in years, and the last time might have been when Bonnie was still in high school, and even then it was just a weekend at the nearby lake. This time I want to go all out. I'm talking about a week-long trip to Hawaii, all expenses paid, airfare, luxury resort activities, the whole shebang. You may ask, why Hawaii? Because that's where my parents went on their honeymoon. I think it would be romantic for them to revisit the start of their honeymoon with their children. Who doesn't like Hawaii? Sun, sand, surf, paradise on earth. You should have seen their faces when I announced the trip to my parents. My mom even got a little teary-eyed. Dad tried to act cool, but I could tell he was over the moon. They started reminiscing about their honeymoon, sharing stories I'd never heard before, and it was a beautiful time, and I felt like the best son in the world. My brother's reaction was exactly what I expected. He gave me a hug and immediately started planning all the activities we could do together, surfing, hiking, even skydiving if we could convince my parents. His enthusiasm was boundless, and I found myself getting more and more excited about the trip, and then Bonnie. I admit I was a little worried about her reaction to my surprise and relief. She seemed genuinely excited, and she started listing things she wanted to do on Instagram, which made me roll my eyes internally, but at least she was excited for a moment. I even felt that the trip might bring us closer together, that maybe this was a turning point in our family dynamic, and I was looking forward to it. I was so naive. The problems almost immediately arose. Bonnie, in her usual way, decided that since I was paying, she should be in charge of planning the itinerary. She didn't ask, she ordered. She told me that you're not good at planning itineraries, as if I hadn't managed to organize the whole holiday. Leave the itinerary to me and I'll make sure we have the best time ever. Let me clarify, I wanted to plan this trip for a reason. First, it was my treat. I wanted to surprise everyone with well-planned activities, but more importantly, I know my sister. If I let Bonnie take charge, we'll end up with gold-plated toilets and a private jet to go around the island. More importantly, I know my sister, and when someone else is paying, Bonnie will taste champagne on a beer budget. If I let her take charge, we'll end up with a gold-plated toilet and a private jet trip around the island. Let me tell you about the last time we all went out to dinner together. Bonnie ordered the most expensive steak on the menu, along with a bottle of $200 wine. When it came time to pay the bill, she conveniently forgot to bring her wallet, but when it was her turn to treat, we were lucky to get a Subway sandwich. I tried to explain the situation to my parents, but they, in their infinite wisdom, suggested a compromise. If you're busy, maybe Bonnie can help plan the activities. I told them that the activities were meant to be a surprise for each other, and I hoped that would be the end of it, but Bonnie disagreed, insisting that she needed to know everything in advance so she could prepare the right clothes. I assured her that it would be a surprise, but she kept turning back to me, urging me to stand my ground. I wanted so badly to keep this article, and in the end I gave in and gave her the itinerary. Big mistake. Huge mistake. As soon as Bonnie got the itinerary, she went into full control crazy mode. She immediately called me and, as she demanded, tore the carefully planned itinerary to shreds. Everything, she said, needed to be rearranged to make everyone comfortable. You know, some of her suggestions actually made sense. So, like an idiot, I agreed to make some changes. Bonnie just needed that encouragement, and suddenly she was acting like the planner of the whole trip. She announced in the family group chat that she was taking over the plans and making some changes. At first, it was okay. She suggested that we wear matching outfits every day, which was kind of cute, but things started to get out of control a week before the trip. Started to spiral out of control. I logged into the account to double-check some details, and my jaw dropped to the floor. Bonnie had canceled some of the activities I had booked, which I had deliberately chosen because I knew everyone would enjoy them, and replaced them with her own preferences. She even posted an executive decision about the itinerary in the family chat, instructing everyone to follow her lead. I was furious. This was supposed to be my gift to my family, but she had hijacked it completely. I called her, trying to remain calm and reason with her, but Bonnie, with her infinite wisdom, simply wouldn't listen to me. I'm better at planning, she insisted, and you should be grateful to me. I've helped you. Grateful, grateful, grateful. I nearly exploded, and I told her, without any ambiguity, that she had gone too far and needed to step back and let me handle the trip for which I had paid. Her response was to accuse me of being too controlling, and then she hung up. That night, my phone rang, and it was my parents, who were clearly upset. Bonnie had cried to them about how I had ruined everything. I tried to explain the situation without giving away the surprise I still had planned, but I quickly learned whose side they were on. Bonnie was just so excited about the trip, they said you should let her take control for once. They didn't seem to understand or care that she was completely ignoring my efforts and money. Their attitude was basically, who planned or paid doesn't matter, we're family. I felt like I was on crack. Was I the only one who saw that moment when I almost wanted to cancel the whole damn trip? But I took a deep breath and decided to take the high road. Okay, I thought, if Bonnie wants to be in control so badly, let her handle it. I'll just sit back and enjoy. Even if it wasn't the trip I had envisioned, my friends, the drama was far from over. 2 days before we were due to depart, 24 hours to be exact, I received notification that my flight had been canceled. At first I thought there must be some mistake, so I called the airline in a panic, only to be told that the order to cancel came from my account and there was nothing they could do. I knew immediately who was behind it. I called Bonnie when she answered the phone, and she had the nerve to ask me to act like nothing was wrong. Oh, and by the way, she giggled when I confronted her about the tickets. Is that funny? I was so angry I was red in the face. She explained, okay, I hate to say this, and she said it without any remorse at all. I know you funded the trip, blah, 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 but we can't let you come, man. You're too controlling, and your negativity will ruin everyone's vacation. I've discussed it with everyone, and the family has agreed to ditch you. You're not worth ruining our trip. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I paid for and planned the trip as a gift for my family, and the trip went ahead without me. Bonnie convinced everyone that the problem was with me, and they all agreed. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I would no longer let her push me around. I didn't say anything to Bonnie, just hung up the phone, logged into my account, and with a few clicks, canceled her flight and rebooked it in my name. Just to be on the safe side, I also changed the account password so she couldn't log in again and changed the travel itinerary. I wrote a message to the family group chat because Bonnie had decided not to welcome me on the trip I was paying for. I had canceled her flight, and if any of you wanted to go with her, I was happy to cancel your tickets as well. The consequences were immediate. My phone started to receive notifications, and the first call was from my brother. I was relieved that he seemed as shocked by the whole thing as I was. He kept repeating that he had no idea that Bonnie planned to kick me off the trip. According to him, Bonnie had made it all up, and neither he nor my parents had agreed to it. While I was still on the phone with my brother trying to process this new information, they called to express their outrage that I had canceled Bonnie's ticket, accusing me of being petty and vindictive. I stood my ground, explaining again that I had planned and paid for the trip as a gift to my family, and if they didn't want me to go, I would go alone, but I would not sacrifice my hard-earned money and sacrifice myself for their comfort. To their credit, they seemed genuinely shocked when I told them Bonnie had canceled my ticket. They swore they had never asked her to do so, but they weren't too happy that I had retaliated by canceling her ticket. They insisted that we all needed this trip as a family. I told them bluntly that I wasn't going to let Bonnie decide whether I was being generous, and that if she wanted to plan her own trip, she was welcome to do so with her own money, but it was my gift and I wasn't going anywhere. Meanwhile, Bonnie kept sending me angry text messages, calling me every name in the book, accusing me of ruining everything and being a terrible brother. I just forwarded all her messages to our parents so they could see for themselves what their precious daughter was really like. After a while, my father called me back and offered to mediate. He suggested that I have a phone call with Bonnie so she could apologize to me, and then I would help her book the flight. Part of me wanted to just say no. Why should I make the first move when she's the one who tried to kick me off her trip? But another part of me was curious to see how things would play out. I knew full well that the chances of her apologizing were as slim as snow in Hawaii, so I agreed to the conference call. My father added Bonnie to the call, but she was so angry that she didn't realize it was a conference call. My father started by telling her that it was mean to cancel my flight and that she should apologize, but before he could finish, Bonnie exploded. She shouted, "Apologize to that jerk? No way. I did everything right. He's going to ruin everything. He's so controlling," attitude, followed by a long, awkward silence. I could almost hear the wheels turning in my dad's head as he realized that they had been condoning Bonnie's behavior for years, and, without saying much more, he hung up. A little while later, I called him back and asked him, "Do you now realize how cruel your daughter is?" I asked him, "Do you still want me to take her on the trip?" He was silent for a long time, and finally he said, "I'm torn between the two children." He said, "I don't know what to do." You know, I feel partly sorry for him, but the bigger part of me is just relieved that, finally, my parents have seen Bonnie for who she really is. Just as I'm sitting here now, I can't help but feel a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, I know I've done the right thing by refusing to be a doormat and let Bonnie trample all over me and take advantage of my generosity. On the other hand, I'm sad that things have come to this, that this is not at all the trip I had envisioned. I wish this had been a family trip, an opportunity to reconnect and make new memories together. No matter how I feel about Bonnie, she is still part of the family. My brother and I may be able to enjoy the trip without her, but I know my parents will be saddened by her absence. But maybe this is the wake-up call our family needs. Maybe now my parents will finally understand that their coddling of Bonnie has created a monster. Maybe this is the push we all need to address the issues that have been festering for years. I've packed my bags and am ready to go on the trip I planned and paid for, but the joy and excitement I once felt have been replaced by a lump of anxiety in my stomach. My brother is still coming, my parents are still on the fence, and Bonnie, Well, she's probably plotting her revenge as we speak. Whatever happens next, at least I can say I finally stood up for myself. Hey, if all else fails, I hear Hawaii is beautiful this time of year, even if you're going alone. Guys, Ada, thanks for canceling my sister's trip, which I paid for with my own money. Update. Hey, Reddit, update the whole debacle of the trip, because things got even worse. If you can believe me, remember how I canceled Bonnie's flight after she tried to kick me off my own trip? Apparently, it was just the beginning of her master plan to ruin everything. After I told everyone in the family group chat, Bonnie went into full meltdown mode. We're talking nuclear-level tantrum, but instead of admitting she screwed up, maybe I don't know, she apologized like a normal person. She decided to double down on her insanity. She tried to rope my brother into her plan. One night, she suddenly called him up with a brilliant idea to get him to co-sponsor the trip with her so they could go without me. Yes, you read that right. She wanted to team up with our brother, basically to steal the trip I had planned and paid for. Now, my brother may not be perfect, but he is no idiot. His first question was, "Do you even have that kind of money?" Bonnie's response was, "I don't have it now, but I'll pay you back as soon as I can." I wish I could have seen my brother's face when he heard that. I think it was a mixture of disbelief and a joke. Bonnie's idea of a job was a part-time job at the local coffee shop. By part-time, I mean she comes in whenever she feels like it, but that doesn't happen very often. She has been fired countless times because she feels that punctuality and conscientiousness are beneath her, so her promise to pay as soon as possible is about as reliable as my brother's decision to see how far Bonnie is willing to go. He asks her if she really plans to do this, and she replies, "Of course, but if the trip to Hawaii is too expensive, we can go to Mexico." I swear, sometimes I wonder if Bonnie and I are really related. Mexico. She wanted to downgrade the full Hawaii trip to a budget-conscious Mexico trip, and my brother had to pay for it. My sister's nerve is truly breathtaking. My brother, who is obviously better at poker face than I am, manages to stay calm and points out the obvious. Why would he trade a free Hawaii trip for a trip he has to pay for himself? Bonnie's personal Instagram photographer, and Bonnie reacted furiously to this, hanging up the phone and starting to bombard his phone with a barrage of insults that would make a sailor blush. And it was clear that he was a selfish bastard and a mama's boy because he didn't want to fund her holiday. I'm sure Bonnie wasn't finished. Oh no, she had a trump card up her sleeve. For the next few days, she was at her parents' house, crying and saying that we had abandoned her and torn the family apart. She portrayed herself as a poor, innocent victim, excluded from the family holiday. To their credit, my parents stood their ground this time and told her that if she wanted to go on the trip, she would need to apologize and make things right. In Bonnie's world, apologizing is something that other people do. She refused to apologize, insisting that she had done nothing wrong and that I was the one who needed to apologize because you always try to embarrass her and buy everyone's love with money. Yes, because apparently planning a nice family trip had now become a plot to undermine her. My parents did try to play peacemaker, calling me to ask if I would be a big person and let Bonnie come along, but I stood my ground. I told them that I would not indulge her behavior by giving in to her demands. If she wanted to come along, she would have to take responsibility for her actions and apologize. It was as simple as that. On the day of the trip, the mood was tense, to say the least. My brother was bouncing around like a child on Christmas morning, while my parents looked like they were going to a funeral rather than a tropical paradise. As we boarded the plane, I could feel the weight of their disappointment, which was written all over their faces. Our whole family should have come, but you know it wasn't my fault, it was Bonnie's. I refused to let her ruin everyone else's vacation. Things started to get better, but it's hard to stay angry when you're surrounded by pristine beaches, crystal clear water, and spectacular sunsets. I threw myself into making sure everyone had a good time. We went to a private luau, tried snorkeling, and took a helicopter tour of the island. But I could see my parents visibly starting to relax and enjoy themselves, but Bonnie certainly wasn't going to let us have a good time. She tried to spoil the whole week. My phone was constantly flooded with her angry messages, alternating between rage and pity. I hope you all get sunburned, eaten by sharks, and feel sorry for yourselves. I can't believe my family would abandon me like this. My parents occasionally got in touch with her, but even they began to see through or take action, which was amazing when you consider how clear things become when you're not in the middle of Bonnie's drama storm. At the end of the trip, we had a suitcase full of incredible memories and maybe a few too many souvenir t-shirts. My parents, while still sad that Bonnie wasn't there, admitted that they had a great time. They even thanked me for all the effort I had put into planning everything. When we got home, I found out that Bonnie had blocked me on all social media platforms. Apparently, seeing photos of our trip was too much for her, and she was furious that our parents had chosen me over her and threatened to cut them off. Of course, that threat sounded a bit hollow considering she was still living in their house rent-free. She didn't let our brother off the hook either, calling him a freerider, because apparently in Bonnie's world, accepting gifts from siblings is free riding, but expecting your brother to fund your holidays is perfectly reasonable. The final act of this farce came on Sunday, when Bonnie announced that she never wanted to see me again. You know I had no problem with that. I was tired of tiptoeing around her, tired of her endless dramas and self-righteousness. Don't get me wrong, it still hurts, even though she is my sister. I wish things could be different, but I refuse to keep warming myself up for her. I defend myself, set boundaries, and insist. If that makes me the bad guy in her story, so be it. Maybe one day Bonnie will grow up and realize that the world doesn't revolve around her, and then we can maybe repair our relationship. But until then, I'll keep the memory of that incredible trip, a trip made possible because I finally said enough to Bonnie's entitled behavior. Hey, if nothing else, at least I'm tanned and have some great stories to tell. Silver lining behind the clouds update to all rights read. A few months have passed since the 2024 Hawaii meltdown, and honestly, I was hoping things would have calmed down by now. If anything, things have gotten even more ridiculous since we got back from Hawaii. I dove headlong into work, partly because I had to make up for lost time, but also because I needed a break from all the family drama. I wanted to give everyone some space to cool off, and Bonnie would use the time to reflect on her actions and grow as a better person. Yes, I know I'm a hopeless optimist, and while I was busy taking care of my brother, I may have indulged in some petty revenge. We posted pictures of the trip on social media, thinking about the perfect sunset, the tie on the beach, the big smiles and lightly sunburned faces of all of us. Did that make it mature? Probably not. Did it feel good? Of course it did. The feeling of happiness was indeed so. Fast forward 3 months later, I finally had some time to myself and decided to go to my parents' house for dinner. When I pulled up to the house, something felt off, and it took me a minute to realize what it was. Bonnie's beat-up Volkswagen Beetle, a gift from our parents for her 21st birthday, wasn't in the driveway. As I walked in, I noticed that Bonnie's room was empty, not just the empty room of someone who'd gone away for the day, but the empty room of someone who'd moved out, the walls bare, the closets open and cleaned out, and the air heavy with the faint smell of disinfectant. Despite everything, Bonnie is still my sister, and the thought of her alone, well, I've seen her grow up before, and it wasn't pretty. I found my parents in the kitchen, looking much more relaxed, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. When I asked about Bonnie, they exchanged a look that said they'd finally done what should have been done years ago. They were cutting ties now before you started to think my parents were heartless monsters who had thrown their daughter out of the house. Let me give you some background. This has been a long time coming. Bonnie has never taken responsibility for anything, nor has she ever been concerned with work ethics or basic human decency. She changes jobs quickly and doesn't stay long at any of them, because apparently, turning up on time and doing the job she is being paid for is just plain unfair. A year ago, my parents finally made up their minds and told Bonnie that if she wanted to continue living at home, she would have to start paying rent. You might think they would have asked her to donate a kidney, but instead she threw a tantrum worthy of a toddler, berating them and accusing them of not loving her. But my father stood firm, and he told her that either she would pay rent or find somewhere else to live. Faced with the prospect of having to fend for herself, Bonnie reluctantly agreed to pay rent. Want to know how much rent she actually paid over the past year? In 12 months, she came up with a new excuse every single month for 3 whole months. For example, I need new work clothes, my car needs repairs, Mercury is in retrograde, it's unlucky to pay rent during this period of time. I wish I had made all this up until we returned from Hawaii. Bonnie really pulled out all the stops. She flew into a rage at our parents, screaming that they had abandoned her and chosen me over her. When they tried to calm her down and give her the gifts we had brought back, she literally threw them back in their faces. That was the last straw for my dad, who told her to pack her bags, that he had had enough of her behavior. Bonnie realized she had finally gone too far and made a complete 180-degree turn. Suddenly, she was in tears, apologizing, clinging to our mom and promising that she would do better. She would pay the rent on time, she would rein in her behavior, but my parents finally saw through her manipulations and stood firmly by her side. They helped her find a small apartment and even paid the first 2 months' rent. My father even gave her a copy of Stern to talk about responsibility and growing up. To be honest, I still think it was too generous. Bonnie was handed on a silver platter, while the rest of us had to work hard for everything. It was exhausting, but I kept my mouth shut. At least she moved out. Everything seemed fine for the first few months. Bonnie would come over for dinner once in a while, but nothing special. But then my mom noticed an increasingly frequent pattern. It was always dinner time. She started spending the night more and more often. At first, my parents thought it was homesickness, but as the weeks went by and Bonnie's visits became more frequent and longer, they began to suspect that something was wrong. Finally, after this had been going on for about 4 months, they sat Bonnie down for a chat, and that's when the truth came out. Bonnie hadn't paid a single month's rent since moving out. She had been avoiding the landlord, couch surfing with friends, and freeloading off our parents to avoid going back to her own apartment. When my mom asked her where all the money from her miraculously kept job had gone, Bonnie answered, "Pinnacle Bonnie, after more than a month, and I had to buy shoes for work." I'm sorry, but unless she's a centipede, I'm pretty sure she doesn't need to spend 3 months' rent on shoes. My mother still tried to support Bonnie, offering to lend her the money to pay the rent, but Bonnie, in her infinite wisdom, insisted that she should move back home. Dad stepped in. He finally snapped. He told Bonnie unequivocally that she was on her own from now on. No more bailouts, no more free meals, no more living at home. He even said that if she ever showed up again looking for help, they would not open the door. It may have been harsh, but after years of indulging Bonnie's behavior, I think my parents finally realized that tough love was the only way to go. Of course, Bonnie did not appreciate this, and she tried every trick in the book, crying, begging, feeling guilty, threatening, even threatening to disown them, as if that would punish them. But my parents did not give in. Our parents stood firm. Bonnie finally turned to her brother for help. She called him up and made up a sad story about how everyone had been cruel and unfair to her. My brother didn't fall for it. He told her straight away that he couldn't help her financially, as he was barely making ends meet himself. Financially help her then. Bonnie then had the nerve to ask me if I would lend her the money and pass it on to her. You might think that Bonnie asking me for money would make me feel self-important and make her feel like a loser. If she really needed the money that badly, she should have just dropped her pride and asked me herself. Bonnie's response was to call him my bootlicker and accuse him of being my pet, running around for free. Meatloaf, I don't even know what that means, but I'm pretty sure it's not a compliment. So here's what happened. Bonnie was alone, probably couch surfing, avoiding the landlord. My parents have finally stood firm on their ground. My brother and I are obviously in some kind of master-pet relationship, revolving around the Meatloaf news, for me, but thankfully, I'm sitting here marveling at the utter chaos of my family. And I'm glad that my parents have finally stopped indulging Bonnie's behavior, which was long overdue, and maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs to pull her act together. I know some people may think I'm being too harsh, but she's family, and they'll say you can't just cut her off like that. You know they're right. Bonnie is family. No matter what happens, she'll always be my sister. But family doesn't give you the right to treat people however you like, or manipulate them into feeling guilty and throwing a tantrum when you don't get what you want. Family should mean more love and respect for each other, not less. I know Bonnie's story isn't over yet, and those who know her are probably already planning their next move, trying to get back into our parents' house or guilting one of us into bailing her out. But at least there's a long overdue calm in our family for now. And that's that. Reddit Bonnie is independent, my parents have stuck to their guns, and here I am sharing this story with a bunch of strangers on the internet, because let's face it, sometimes life is so ridiculous that you just have to laugh. Thanks for listening. I'll be sure to update you if there are any new developments in Bonnie's story. But for now, I'm off to make meat rolls, which I hear are great for bribing siblings. Update 3. You know what they say about karma, and it turns out my sister Bonnie is simply unbeatable when it comes to bringing unexpected rewards. 6 months have passed since my last update. 6 months of unspectacular happiness, and I almost forgot what it was like to have my life turned upside down by Hurricane Bonnie. I should have known better. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon, and I was at my parents' house for our newly started weekly family dinners. Of course, Mom was busy in the kitchen, Dad was watching the game, and my brother and I were engaged in an intense intellectual contest. Well, we were playing Mario Kart, but it suddenly got really intense when the door was knocked on. We were both stunned because no one ever knocked. We all had keys, and our friends and relatives knew to call before coming over. We all just silently looked at each other, asking each other if we were expecting someone. Then we heard the voice, the shrill voice from the nightmare that had haunted me for the past year. Mom, Dad, is anyone home? It's me, Bonnie. I swear, you could have heard a pin drop, even an ant sneeze at that moment. We all stared at the door, as if it would open any second, unleashing the zombie apocalypse. Dad was the first to act. He stood up, squared his shoulders as if preparing for battle, and opened the door. Bonnie was there, looking fine, honestly. She looked like she'd been through hell. Her hair, which she usually spent hours styling, was tied in a messy ponytail. She was wearing typical designer clothes she couldn't afford, crumpled and looking like she'd had a sleep-in. I felt bad, and then she opened her mouth and any warm fuzzy feelings I might have had vanished as quickly as a snowball in Hawaii. Daddy, she said, I'm home. I had to hand it to my dad. He didn't even flinch. He just stood there blocking the doorway and said in the coolest voice I'd ever heard, No, Bonnie, you're not Bonnie. Her face crumpled up like she'd been slapped. She tried to push past him, but Dad stood his ground. We've talked about this, Bonnie, he said. You're not welcome here anymore, unless you pull yourself together. Then she started bawling her Oscar-worthy eyes out. But Dad said, I've got nowhere else to go. If I don't pay the rent, they'll arrest me. Don't you love me anymore? Bonnie had pulled some tricks in her day, but this time she had really gone too far. She stood there crying her eyes out, like a lost little girl, not a grown woman who had repeatedly let her family down. I could see my mother wavering. She had always had a soft spot for Bonnie, and seeing her baby girl in trouble clearly broke her heart. But before she could say anything, my brother walked in and said, Arrest you. He said it with a sneer, because the rent hadn't been paid. Come on, Bonnie B., we weren't born yesterday. Bonnie's tears dried quickly. She glared at my brother as if she wanted to burn him with her thoughts. Mind your own business. This is between me and my parents. Oh no, I've had enough. I stood up, walked to the door, and looked Bonnie straight in the eye. No, I said, this is between you and all of us. Come back here, pretend the past year never happened. You can't manipulate Mom and Dad anymore. You've made your choice. Bonnie, now you have to live with them. Oh, look who it is. The golden boy, always so perfect, isn't he? Well, guess what? Nobody likes you, smug little shit. You think you're so much better than me, but you're not. You're just a stuck-up little arsehole who doesn't know how to enjoy life. I was about to retort when Dad cut in. His voice was as hard as steel. Enough, Bonnie, you must leave now. Bonnie looked at him and then at Mum, obviously hoping for support, but Mum remained silent. She looked torn, but didn't contradict Dad. Fine, Bonnie, I see. You're all against me. Fine, I don't need any of you. I'll sort this out on my own. And don't come to me when you realize what a terrible mistake you've made. And with that, she turned around and walked away. We watched her get into the old VW. I really couldn't figure out how she kept that car running. She screamed as she raced out of the driveway and stood there for a long time. Then Mum started crying. Dad put his arms around her and comforted her softly. My brother and I exchanged a look, and we both knew that this was not over yet. The mood was oppressive as we ate dinner, but no one really tasted the food as we all thought about what had just happened. Later, when I was helping my mother clear the table, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "Are we doing the right thing?" she asked. "Should we let her stay?" I took a deep breath and said gently, "Mom, you know as well as I do that letting her stay isn't going to solve anything. Bonnie needs to grow up and take responsibility for her actions. Actions that we can't condone." Mum nodded, but I saw the pain in her eyes. "I was just worried about her. She said she was eating enough, had a place to sleep. What if something happened to her?" I gave her a hug. "I know, Mom. I'm worried too. But Bonnie is an adult. We have to trust that she will figure it out. If she really wants to change, she knows what she needs to do." Driving home that night, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. When you have a family like mine, who needs a soap opera? I really should write this stuff down. Who knows, maybe one day I'll turn it into a book. Surviving with Hurricane Bonnie, a survival guide for siblings with long-term rights. Bestseller material right there, folks. Bestseller material. So that's the latest news from the Bonnie saga. Reddit, will I ever master the blue shell in Mario Kart? Seriously, that thing is the bane of my existence, thanks. Listen, Reddit, your support and advice have been a lifesaver through all this madness. I hope the next update is about Bonnie turning her life around and becoming a productive member of society, but honestly, it'll probably be something ridiculous like her trying to sell essential oils or join a cult. On the other hand, Reddit, I'm going to go practice my Mario Kart skills. After all, I need to be ready for the next family showdown.